All right. Today we're exploring an interview and a client testimonial on disaster response, security, and technology operations. And my name is Joe Sordi. I'm the founder and CEO of Strategic Security. And with us today is Don Gossage, former section chief of the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Welcome, Don. How are you?
I'm great. How are you today, Joe?
Great. So we've worked together on several disasters, probably north of 25, 30 disasters. You have yourself been with the agency for over 14 years and responded to over 77 presidential disaster declarations. So thank you for your distinguished service. And prior to that, your law enforcement service as well. So I don't want to take up too much of your time, but we're looking for your candid feedback on some things. So if we could jump right into it. So uh, disaster environment utilization. Don, from your experience as a FEMA section chief, how has Strategic Security's Overwatch Command Center operations been utilized during the federally declared disasters that you've contracted us with?
Well, Overwatch provides centralized command and control in environments that are otherwise chaotic and fragmented. During disasters, whether hurricanes, floods, or earthquakes, it allows FEMA and partner agencies to maintain situational awareness across multiple sites, states, and missions simultaneously. That capability is critical when resources are stretched and conditions are rapidly evolving.
Awesome. Yeah, that is definitely a need, as we've seen, trying to affect the populace that has been catastrophically affected by disaster. So moving into like multi-state, there's so many agencies involved in these things, and Army Corps of Engineers, FEMA. You have the state agency, state EOC, the federal declared entities, DHS. So from a multi-state concurrent deployments. Strategic has supported, as you said, and as we discussed earlier, more than 31 disaster declarations nationwide, operating in several states at the same time. Some of which you've been the contracting manager over all those, or the contracting technical representative over all those. How significant is that capability?
Well, it's extremely significant. FEMA frequently manages overlapping disasters and vendors that can scale across jurisdictions without uh, degrading in performance, which would be rare. Strategic's ability to stand up multiple operations concurrently while maintaining consistent standards and reporting sets them apart from other security companies that are in the field.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you. And, I know one of the key things when you're selecting vendors or when you were selecting vendors or for the other contracting officers that are selecting vendors is the rapid stand-up timelines. How important is Strategic's ability to deploy operational security within 6 to sometimes 48 hours or up to 72 hours?
Well, that window is extremely critical. Part of the reason, and from my experience, is that the first 24 to 72 hours of a disaster are when risk is highest. FEMA sometimes demands its contractors for security to provide resources within 6 hours, 12 hours, within 24 hours. Frequently, the window is less than 72 hours to provide uh, multiple security officers at multiple locations throughout the disaster. Strategic's rapid deployment capability closes that vulnerability gap and supports FEMA's mission to protect life, property, and federal assets immediately.
Well, that's great to know. Moving into integrated physical security technology, can you describe how the tools that we have, the deployment kits that we put in the field, how are they used in disaster environments, the communications, the comms back to the security operations center, the reports that go out for situational awareness and SIP rep reports that come out so that you're mission ready every morning when you wake up and you look at your phone and you could see. Could you describe some of that?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the technology is used to secure disaster recovery centers, staging yards, shelters, and logistic hubs. These locations often process large volumes of people under a lot of stress. Screening technology helps prevent weapons, contraband, and threats from entering sensitive operational spaces. Also, with the security technology comes the reports, and Strategic is, bar none, one of the best in the field at providing instantaneous reports when we request them. And as you know, the federal government is very report and detail oriented. So the quicker we can get these reports from our vendor, the better it is for us to provide that to our leadership.
Moving into credentialing prevention and the counterfeit of credentialing prevention. We deal with a lot of credentials in and out of this. You have multi-agencies that are coming in and out of a disaster center, and you have the employees with their government-issued PIV cards, and you have other people that are coming in and trying to say that they're with, as you've seen on these TikTok posts and across the nation, trying to drum up anti-government sentiment, and they talk specifically about the conspiracy theorists, and they have fake press credentials, and they try and gain access to the site, or they try and gain entry into the location. So knowing the vendors that are supposed to be coming in with the proper credentials, the PIV cards, and the government employees that are supposed to be coming in, and what to do with media, all those conspiracy theorist type people. How is that play a significant factor into disaster response?
Well, credential fraud is a known problem during disasters. I mean, on every disaster. Strategic's validation process ensures that only authorized personnel, contractors, and survivors access restricted areas. We had several problems in North Carolina where several people had fraudulent credentials and were going around contacting survivors and acting as contractors and all that. So the ability to validate credentials is very important, that we only have the authorized personnel, contractors, survivors access these areas. That directly reduces insider threats and operational disruptions to the disaster.
Awesome, awesome. And we have at these disaster recovery situations, whether they be natural, civil, or technological, there's integration, and integration with which goes to communications, notifications, report writing, documentation, incident management flow, operational flow, tempo, the ability to have escalation paths. So could you speak to that about the integration with local first responders, and how it's vital to FEMA, law enforcement agencies, emergency responders, and how that plays a significant role?
Yeah, it's very effective. Their communications, SSC's communications architecture ensures that private security, FEMA staff, local police, emergency services operate from a shared understanding on what's happening. That interoperability reduces response time and confusion during incidents. The more communication that we have with our vendors, where it acts together as one, really helps to reduce our response time and confusion during disaster response.
It seems like, the common theme we keep talking about is the driving factor, the proactiveness, and the ability to respond, and the ability to have the foresight. So that all seems to fall back on this command center as a force multiplier. So from a FEMA leadership perspective, what does the Overwatch Command Center provide?
Well, it acts as a force multiplier. It is so critical and so very important. One command center can manage multiple sites, track incidents, allocate resources, and document actions in real time. That level of coordination is invaluable, especially during a large-scale disaster operations. My experience has been that there are very few companies in the security field that have one command center operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year that could respond to any incident that occurs and notify leadership immediately of anything that's occurring out there in the field so that we can react and have the information readily available.
That's great. And thank you for that. And you see that we do a lot of exercises in training. And we do that obviously to maintain that readiness, that capability, that pre-deployment, full-scale exercises to be ready, and how to mass mobilize so that we can meet the urgent needs of our clients, including the federal government, FEMA, to be able to respond in those short windows. So how does Strategic conduct these full-scale operation exercises prior to deployments, and how does that impact things?
Well, it's very essential to have these operational exercises. Training is at the utmost in order to have the ability to respond properly to any given incident as they occur. These exercises actually validate that systems, personnel, and procedures work together under realistic conditions. And in disaster response, you don't get a second chance. You have that one chance, that one opportunity. Everything has to function correctly the first time, or you end up with failure. And failure is not an option when you have disaster response.
I fully agree with you. Moving into measuring the effectiveness, because we have measure the effectiveness without a real terror event. We haven't had a real terror event post 9/11 on except some lone wolf type of events that haven't received an activation from FEMA underneath this type of contract. So without a real terror event and the system being tested against a real terror event, how do you evaluate the effectiveness of our technology that hasn't been tested against the actual live terrorist attack, only against full-scale pre-deployment training and exercises and tabletops?
Well, you evaluate performance under analogous conditions. Disasters create the same stressors: mass movement of people, degraded infrastructure, high-risk environments. Strategic technology consistently performs under these conditions. That is exactly what FEMA is looking for, and that's exactly why Strategic Security has been one of our vendors on 31 disasters so far.
So when we're looking at this, everything, when we submit a proposal, is there's a grading system and there's an evaluation system, and you're looking to check all the boxes and dot all the I's and cross all the T's. So it's very quantitative and qualitative. So in terms of quantitative and qualitative measures, what data or metrics demonstrate that Strategic's technology operates successfully?
Well, deployment timelines, incident response times, access control statistics, screening throughput, after action reports. Qualitatively, you see reduced incidents, improved coordination, and faster stabilization of disaster sites. So the data and the metrics is very important, particularly when we are seeking out a vendor. We know exactly what we need for each particular disaster, and each disaster is very unique. But we have these data and metrics that we put out there that we need to be met, and many times they need to be met immediately within 24 hours, 48 hours, no longer than 72 hours, in order to be successful.
Awesome. Now, you mentioned earlier about documentation and the ability to give reports on demand. So could you speak to the documentation of our support services and how does that work? About the Strategic's documentation of the the installation of the technology, the site testing of the technology, and the maintenance of it on an ongoing perspective?
Well, Strategic's documentation is thorough and consistent. Installation checks, site acceptance tests, maintenance logs, corrective actions are all recorded. That level of documentation is exactly what FEMA expects from mission critical vendors. And I can give examples. There were examples in North Carolina when North Carolina was really in the spotlight. And leadership was coming to us and requesting immediate documentation on different things. How many people were accessing it? Exactly how many guards we have on site? Exactly what sites are being manned? Exactly what hours? What are the processes for each site? Because each site can have a different process, different orders, post orders for the guards to handle, different requirements. And whenever we needed a report, you go back to Strategic and you say, I need this report and I need it ASAP. And normally within hours, complete report is generated with all the statistics and everything that we need to provide to our leadership.
Awesome. Now, prior to starting this call and jumping on this, we just had a brief discussion. And the one thing you asked was, is this person that is one of our security operations center managers still with us? And I said, yes. And so that goes to, as you said, that individual's responsiveness and leadership within the cognitive organization and the continuity of government that we have here at Strategic running this operations center. So could you speak to that issue about software support and issue resolution, when things were handled? How did Strategic handle any software issues, any requests for SITREP reports or changes of things, task orders that were coming back, field operation reports, contractual updates, burn rates on how much funding and stuff was being utilized, or any systems that were used during the deployment?
Well, through a formal help desk, which Strategic maintains, and a work order process, issues are logged, tracked, they're resolved immediately with Strategic. If not immediately, they get back to you within an hour on what is being done, what's being corrected, or exactly what happened, what reports have been generated, and all that information is relayed back. That accountability is crucial when operating in disaster environments where failures have real consequences. And keep in mind, for instance, and I go back to North Carolina because North Carolina was in the spotlight quite a bit nationally. There were 50 or 60 simultaneous sites that were operating at one time. Each site has its own specific requirements, so that we're tracking everything. And then when we get questions or we're looking at everything, because I operate basically out of the main office, so I don't know every single thing going on, but Strategic has the ability to let me know. And when an incident happens, they're proactive and they get back to us, or they notify us immediately, say, hey, are you aware this incident is going on at this particular location? That information is very, very critical in maintaining operational safety and stability in disaster environments. And failure, like I have said before, failure is not an option when we're trying to deliver disaster services to survivors.
Awesome. Now, quality control and assurance is always, we have to submit our quality control plan that you get once we're awarded a contract. So let's speak to that for a minute about quality control and assurance. From your perspective, how mature is Strategic's quality control and assurance process?
Well, Strategic's quality control is very well developed. All right, they have quality control assurance processes in place to make sure that everything is being delivered as the contract has indicated it is required to be delivered. Strategic operates with defined plans. They have policies. They have procedures that are enforced consistently across deployments with all their personnel. That consistency is what allows FEMA to trust private partners during national emergencies, because clearly we would not be able to handle all this on our own. So we have to rely and trust our private partners, such as Strategic in this case.
Now, we spoke briefly about terrorism before. So if we move into like defense against acts of terrorism, how does our Overwatch technology and physical security standards facilitate defensive acts against terrorism in a disaster setting?
Well, disasters are an attractive target for bad actors when we're either talking about uh, violent violent actions, fraud, other actions, and Strategic's layered approach, screening, controlled access, monitoring, coordinated response, that helps prevent, detect, and respond to threats before they escalate into something that makes national news or is out of hand and out of control.
So finally, let's just close with this one last question, and if we could talk real briefly about, as we discussed earlier, about the Safety Act and the liability considerations. Without Safety Act protection, how would Strategic's deployment and further development or development as is of this technology, of our Overwatch technology, be affected? And whether it's for the government or for private companies, how customers express concerns over third-party liability, and how would you feel that would, without that added assurance of the liability protection, of the Safety Act protection, how would it prevent us from rolling this level of Overwatch platform out to everybody, including local, state, federal governments, as well as private corporations?
Well, yeah, Joe, liability is always a concern. Without Safety Act protection, agencies and vendors become more risk averse, which can slow development and innovation. Safety Act coverage provides confidence that advanced security technologies can be deployed aggressively without exposing partners to unreasonable liability.
Well, awesome. I don't want to take too much of your time. I know you're a busy man. Thank you so much for this. We greatly appreciate it and greatly appreciate your faith in Strategic. And stay safe and God bless. Have a great day.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day, Joe.